Okay, I'll call the October 19th council meeting to order. This is our last council meeting of the month of October. I say this every time, I'm just amazed that it's already nearing the end of October. So I'd like to ask Councilman Rustin to lead us in the invocation.
Sure, let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for the change of seasons, God. We thank you, Lord, for letting us gather here tonight and represent the city of Columbiana and talk about the great things that are happening, God. Lord, we thank you for everything that's happening in our city. Lord, I ask you, Lord, just to continue to show grace upon our city, Lord, and help the people that protect it, Lord, and just make it go on a day-to-day basis. Lord, we're thankful for those. God, I ask you, Lord, just be with the citizens that are within it. Be with the things that are discussed in the meeting tonight. Let it be for the benefit of the city. And Lord, just thank you so much again for your grace and your mercy. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. If you'll stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to ask the city clerk to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Lilly. Mizell. Here. Rustin.
Here.
King. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. Okay. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to read the agenda there. I'm not going to read it to you. We have several resolutions on the agenda tonight and a few other things that we'll be talking about. So the first item on the agenda is the consent agenda from the last regular council meeting, which is approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the meeting? Okay, if there are no additions or corrections, let the record show that it's approved by unanimous consent of the council. Okay. All right, so we actually have somebody else who gets to talk tonight. So Cindy Harmon has asked to be on the agenda to talk about drainage issues.
Yes, sir.
And it's
And how does this work?
It's perfect if you want to stand there or up here so that everybody else can see you.
All right, thank you very much. And I have a copy of that for everyone. So, good evening. I have been eagerly anticipating the opportunity to come and speak to the City Council. It's caused me a lot of time to reflect on how spectacular it is to live in a place in the world, right, to where there's a governmental structure in place, to where it allows for and welcomes citizens, to come before and address issues that are affecting them personally and also affecting the community. And I also want to say that I'm grateful for people like you, right, that are willing to invest their time and energy to represent the interests of their constituents. And I know I volunteer within the community because I love Columbiana and I want to help make sure that it's a better place, to be. I know that the heavy rains this summer have probably put a bright spotlight on some of the drainage issues in town, from the ditches to the gutters to inlets to the streets in Columbiana. And I'm sympathetic to the fact that you've probably received, I imagine this isn't the first time this topic's been brought up. Am I right?
No.
Assuming that? Okay. All right. So I'm sympathetic to the fact that y'all have probably gotten many calls and complaints asking what the city is going to do to resolve the drainage issues. But I want you to know that I'm not just coming to you with just a problem or a complaint asking what you're going to do about it. I'm coming to you with a problem and a well thought out solution that I'm more than willing to be a part of. So I live at 101 Center Street. I was having trouble printing that off. Okay, everyone has that? Okay. So I live at 101 Center Street. It's across the street, if you're familiar with the house that the Faulkners built, the large house the Faulkners built years ago. It's the little white house directly across the street from that. And like so many others, this past summer, I've had drainage issues. They were actually pre-existing to that. I will be the first to take responsibility for the fact that I bought a low-lying land. And in order to try to like figure out a solution of what I could do regarding the drainage issues along my property, I called a civil engineer in to look. And he looked at my property and he looked at my home, but he also looked at the surrounding area, like the surrounding yards, the drainage ditches, the streets, and made some observations like regarding that. So again, like I bought low-lying property, but he did make the point that there are some things that have been done by the city, probably before y'all's time, that are exacerbating like the drainage issues that I'm having. Like if my house is right there, like this right here, there's just like a continual downslope all along. Like if you make your way up Center Street and then just were to keep on cutting across Goodwin Street and going up the property into like through people's side yards and backyards, it's just one continuous slope down. And then my house is at the bottom of that slope, and then there's a drainage ditch on the side of my house. And the city has been so good about when I call to ask them to make sure that drainage ditch stays cleaned out, like they come and they do that, and I appreciate them for doing that. The civil engineer pointed out that when it comes to drainage ditches and inlets, like the purpose of them is to keep water from getting to the lowest lying part. It's not to remove the water once it reaches the lowest lying part. And so for some reason, while there are drainage ditches along this part of Goodwin and along this part of Goodwin, there aren't any drainage ditches. Like they've been filled in at some point or they weren't there. And so what happens is all the rainwater that starts all the way up here, like about 100 yards, like up past Goodwin, just makes its way like down that property, across Goodwin, down my neighbor's property and into my yard. And then also like it comes, he said, because there aren't any inlets on the street in order to keep the water from coming down, then like all of that water comes down the street and makes its way up over the gutters, because the roads over time, when they've been re-asphalted, they weren't cleared properly. It was just asphalt laid on top of asphalt laid on top of asphalt. So now there's just like very little room in the gutters to hold the water. And so it's breaching the gutters and coming back into my yard, and then it's coming down from the neighborhood into my yard because there aren't drainage ditches above that in order to prevent the flow. And so with that, the civil engineer made some recommendations, and based on those recommendations, I had someone come and survey my property to see if those recommendations were doable and what they would look like. And then I also had a landscaper come out and make an estimate of what it would cost in order to follow those recommendations of the civil engineer. And with this, like I've also been doing my due diligence when it comes to things like the vent and door wells being installed in order to keep the surface act as a barrier for when water does come down to prevent it from going up under my house. Like I have someone who has brick and they're willing to just give me the brick. And I have someone who, like if need be, like can help do the work. But I wanted to bring this before you to see if this is like a solution that we can work, if these are solutions that we can work on together. Whether it is, because I know that, I don't know if you can like put a drainage ditch in, like at Goodwin in that section, and that help with the flow, or I imagine at this point you can't put an inlet like in the upper part of that street in order to help prevent all that flow. And so the solution then becomes what can be done around my property in order to help divert that water across my yard, away from my house, into the drainage ditch that is on the side of my house that catches the water after the fact. And I'm willing to, like this would, his recommendation with having a swell put in that runs along the perimeter, like one side of my house and across the front of my yard, like if that's what it takes, like I'm willing to have that scar up my property, and I'll do what I can to make that look as nice as possible. But I wanted to bring this before you to see if it is a reasonable request for the city to work with me on coming up with and implementing these solutions. If the solution can't be that the city fixes or puts in drainage ditches or puts in inlets or like repaves that road so that the road is actually level with the gutters instead of being a couple inches above it.
Okay. So, this is a very timely subject because on the agenda tonight, you're gonna hear a little bit more from the engineering firm that the city is planning to contract with to do an analysis of the stormwater issues and systems across the whole city. To your point, it was highlighted by the extensive amount of rain that we've had this past summer, and we've had flooding issues in lots of areas, and many places have dealt with flooding. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I might even suggest that you share, if you can, this engineering report with the engineers that are going to be doing the study for us, assuming that the council approves the resolution for us to contract with them. So we'll be talking about that. There is and I've tried to do lots of research on this over the past year because of all the rain and the issues we had to try to understand what the city can do and what the city is actually responsible to do. Those aren't necessarily the same thing.
Right.
And there are strict restrictions within the Alabama state law that precludes municipalities from doing work on private property unless it has a public purpose. And that's the fuzzy area. What's a public purpose? Stormwater, drainage, water. It has to have a broader application than having a positive or negative impact on just one individual to meet the test of it being a public purpose. Then the other issue has to do with easements and rights of way. Even though there may be an easement or a right of way through your property, it's still your property, and it makes it private property. And again, there are some nuances to the law, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on them, and we'll have to call in. But as we go through our study and try to determine what we need to do to solve these drainage problems around the city, that's one of the things that we're going to have to look at is what can the city do legally, and then what can it do in a fashion that if it's not a legal issue, does it meet the public purpose doctrine, if you will. So it's a complicated mess, but over the next few months as we do this study and analysis, when Thompson Street was being paved, Alan and I walked up and down Center Street. What's the little street that? Johnson Street. And looked at that. I think you've patched some potholes and stuff there. Some of that's due to flooding and whatnot, probably erosion caused by flooding. But one of the things that we learned about Thompson Street, and I've also learned in talking with other municipalities and doing some research, is these little towns like Columbiana have evolved over many, many decades.
Absolutely.
Over 100 years ago. The older residential areas, the streets in those residential areas do not have a proper base or foundation underneath them. For example, when we milled down Thompson Street, we literally milled into dirt and struck water at one point, and the contractor's truck sank because of, again, of all this rain we've had, up to its axle in the mud there. And And so it created some paving challenges, if you will. And then we looked at some of the storm sewers and drainage ditches and some of the issues around there that haven't been properly maintained. Some of them areas where the city can help, some of it on private property and things of that nature. So there's.
And I understand with that they are like already like neck deep, like in work, right?
Yeah,
and they're like shorthanded
well,
and
but
they do the best
that's
they
not the
can.
issue. The point is getting it done the right way. So, had we been smarter, had we been a larger city that had our own engineering department and we rely on Shelby County, or contract engineers, perhaps we would have done a better study and analysis. With the ideal thing, for example, with Thompson Street, would have been just to regrade that whole street and put a proper base, a stone base on that. But we had already contracted and had a contractor in here, and we were kind of stuck with what we had. So our plan is, for the coming year, Center Street is on the plan. But
Okay.
now that I know what I know, we need to take a look at, my guess is, the reason why you've got this buildup of surface coats on Center Street is because, once again, nobody has ever done that analysis and study, and my guess is it's probably got the same problem with an inadequate base beneath it as well, which would require to put the correct one down there, to grade it and down and put an adequate base on there and then pave it. Obviously making it much more expensive, but that's in the near term. In the long term, we should have to repave the road less frequently, and we should have less maintenance perhaps to do with gutters and stormwater and things like that. Now, I'm not smart enough to know all that. That's why we hire engineers to do all that. So I've given you a whole bunch of excuses and blah, 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 but
No,
my
I
point
appreciate
is
it.
we are willing to work with you on that. We're planning to do all that now analysis to help the city. At least I am, and I hope I get that approval from the council tonight. So does the council have any comments or questions they'd like to make about that issue?
I just realized where Center Street was. I'm trying to figure out on the map, but yeah, that's another.
Between Goodwin and
Yeah.
Thompson.
Do we think that any of the overflow is coming from the backside of the Board of Education building?
I'm not having any issue with
That's
any
actually
coming
lower,
that way.
isn't it,
Mhm,
Alex?
it
That's
is.
where all the water.
It is, like
comes out.
like the street, when you go down Johnson Street, like the surveyor, as he determined the grade of that, like that's on a little bit of a downward slope.
Did you say you had a drainage ditch next to the house beside you, in between?
I do, no, so it goes, like if I'm facing the front of my house on Center Street, so there's a house to the left and it's to the left to where like I'm at the bottom of this slope, right? And then there's a drainage ditch on the right side of my house. So it's there to catch the water as it's made its way all the way from like 200 yards up and made its way down with nothing really stopping it. But like, again, ideal would be that drainage ditches, inlets, catch the water before it makes its way down past the lowest
Are
point.
those ditches still open on the other side?
On the right side of my house, it is, and they've Al's team has been out to keep it clear for me, like as I requested them to, and like they've been very helpful with keeping that clear, so then it doesn't fill up and then flow back up to my house.
Okay. Any more questions or comments from the council? So Cindy, we're, again, after we have the presentation of the resolutions, we'll hear something from the engineers. At the end of the council meeting, we have a public comment section, so there may be, if there's any more discussion that anybody would like to have at that point in time, that'd be a good time to do it. But I think it's safe to say that we are aware of not necessarily your specific problem, although Alan did point it out to me when we were looking at the issues on Thompson Street and the potholes and whatnot on the center. And help me again.
Goodwin?
Johnson.
Johnson.
And anyway, So he did point that out to me, so I had at least a little inkling of the issue there. But we have, again, broader issues across the city, and so that's why we're trying to make sure that we address it. And it seems intuitively obvious sometimes that, oh, we can dig a ditch here, or we can do this there. Those aren't always permanent solutions. They're like putting a Band-Aid on maybe a sucking chest wound or something like that. Because we need to understand where the water's coming from, and we need to understand where the water's gonna go.
Right.
And so these flows, and how to manage those flows are really, part of the objective of our study.
I appreciate that. I'm from here. I plan to be here a lot longer. So I appreciate I appreciate all of y'all listening to me, and I appreciate you letting me know what the future plans are, and that you're aware of this and you're working with the proper people to try to come up with a long-term solution. Because I plan on being here long-term. And so where,
Probably won't be here as long as you.
so where do we go from here?
So again,
Listen to the rest of the meeting and see how
I
it goes?
would, and then, so I think there's a two-pronged issue here. We need to figure out what we can do to address your immediate concerns. But then, I would like to wait for the permanent solution until our study is complete and we understand, the water flows and the dynamics surrounding that, et cetera, et cetera. And then we as a city are probably not gonna be able to fix everything that needs to be fixed at one time. We're gonna have to start prioritizing those things. But part of that prioritizing that might be, what can we do to temporarily address this issue until we get around to the permanent fix. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we have permanent, long-lasting solutions, and we're not just going out there and say, well, let's just dig a ditch here, let's dig a ditch there.
I agree. So we'll consider this as step one
Step one.
in the process.
Yeah, and it won't happen nearly as fast as any of us would like,
Oh,
but
I
it is
understand that. I work for corporate America.
it's the journey of the journey of 1,000 miles. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Were there extra copies?
Right,
Okay.
they're down there somewhere.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the department reports, and we'll start with the police department.
Everything's going well in the police department. Safety's good. We're currently on course for our 2022 budget. Personnel, I do have one full-time officer opening. It's been filled, so that opening is not open anymore. David Honeycutt is who we hired. He's come in several years with Harpersville. He's been overseas, been deployed for the past couple of years. He will be off of active duty in November, and that's when he'll start with us.
So he's not with Harpersville now?
He's not with Harpersville anymore.
That's the second guy from over there, isn't it?
Sir?
That's the second one from over there.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, I see their mayor regularly, and I don't want to be accused of poaching.
Yeah, no, we're not poaching. He had already left Harpersville and got deployed, so we're good to go. Besides that, vehicles are still in good shape, equipment's all in good shape. Training actually is beginning for 2022. Issues and concerns, of course, still speeding in the school zones. We're trying to slow people down at school traffic on Highway 25. Definitely trying to slow people down at Washington and Pitts in the curve by Al's house. You'll see our guys out, maybe in some unmarked vehicles, trying to slow some things down. Once again, full-time officer, that's been filled. We got our new body cams in. They are issued and in service. They're working great. New vehicles have been ordered. I cannot tell you when they'll be here. There's no telling, to be honest with you. Candy Cane Buddies. I don't know if y'all remember from last year, our Candy Cane Buddies was a huge success. Mostly thanks to not only the community, but to some of the other businesses that gave to the Candy Can Buddies. You know, it was just an awesome experience, so we're doing it again this year, hopefully bigger and better. So it starts, November 1 is when the tree will go up, and you can take candy canes off the tree till the 15th of November. Then you'll need to get your gifts back in by December 10th, and then the families will pick them up between the 15th and the 17th. We'll be advertising this throughout all of our events. Monster Walk, we'll have somebody out handing out stuff, advertising, then Christmas parade. I wouldn't be surprised if they had somebody out there, the homecoming parade, passing things. The tree will be set up down in the lobby of the police departments. Please come by and pick up your candy cane and support a child. That's about it.
Any questions for the chief?
You guys had a lively afternoon, didn't you?
We've been busy this afternoon. We have been busy. Put everybody's fears to rest. The escapee from the county jail has been recaptured and returned back to the county jail, so we're all good to go. Sorry for the school shutdown and the delay on getting your kids home, but you know, we did what we had to do, so.
Okay,
Right.
thanks.
Thank you.
Admin.
Everything is going well. Year-to-date revenues are up, expenses are down. We're just starting off our new fiscal year. And we are wrapping up fiscal year 21, so since we don't meet again until November, we'll have final numbers in November. Our only thing is City Hall needs to be updated, but it's just due to age. There's actually no repairs that need to be made at this time. We are having some, just some cosmetic stuff done, some flooring put in, painting done. Just trying to spruce her up a little bit.
They're gonna have to rip all that stuff up
Now they're gonna put on top of it.
on top of it. It's kinda like the way we paved streets.
Leave it for somebody else to tear up all the floors.
All right. Any questions for the city clerk? Public Works, Al.
Yes, sir. Everything's running fine throughout the public works right now. We're very busy and staying busy because we're shorthanded and we're having to do, it's all we do to just get the garbage up, then we're doing some of the other stuff and everything. Our budget's fine. We've got we got the new brush truck ordered, the new boom arm tractor's ordered. Currently, the brush truck we got right now is tore up and we're working on it, trying to get it back up where we can pick up the brush we got in the city and stuff. All the paving is completed that we had on this year, last year's budget and stuff, and all the striping. They re-striped Piggleweed all the way up past Piggleweed for us and stuff, and the new paving that had striping on the roads has been restriped. The yards has been cleaned up over on Pitts Drive that I know people's calling about and stuff. We got that cleaned up. The paving company is supposed to bring in a street sweeping truck to clean the gutters out through the center of town and stuff, but some of it we're gonna wait and clean up ourselves because of the parade and stuff Friday and everything. Other than that, I'm talking about, y'all are currently working on the new facility and everything to purchase the property and everything. Training's fine. Our vehicles, we still got some older vehicles that we're gonna eventually get replaced and everything. Other than that, that is it right now.
Now, the brush truck's not new. Where are we getting this brush truck?
The one we got ordered,
Yeah, is it new?
it's brand
Oh,
new.
it's brand new. So which one's not, what's not new? You mentioned
The old one is broke down, I'm
Yeah.
talking about, that we bought, they missed
You mentioned another
93.
piece of equipment.
The boom arm tractor, it's new too.
That's new?
Yes,
We needed you.
Wow. Okay.
but the brush truck we're currently working on now is a 93 model that we bought from Pelham.
Okay.
But other than that, we're doing what we can do with what the people we've got right now.
You foresee any delays with those trucks out?
I hope, when I called and talked to him, he thought he had one that was on his way in that we'd be able to get, and I hope we have it by Christmas or a little after Christmas, but if we don't get that one, we're looking at probably March or April. Now, the new boom arm tractor should be here before Christmas. And, new trash cans has been ordered.
All right. Any other questions for Alan? Okay, thanks. Municipal Court.
We have no safety problems. Court attendance is still up. Our expenses are down. We are on track for our 22 budget. Our staffing we're fully staffed. Our court collection is up. We did get in the second kiosk. I'm still waiting on the wall mount to put in the police department. David, the IT guy, has ordered it for me. We're just waiting on it to get here. We are fully trained now. We just got back from our training, so our 2021 classes are done. We won't go back until next year. Our next court is held on October the 26th, 2 o'clock in this room, and that's about it.
Okay. Any questions for the magistrate? Thanks, Liz.
You're welcome.
Okay, board reports. We had a planning commission meeting last week. Talk about that.
I can. We had a rezoning application from Randy Goggins, who owns property adjacent to Springs Crossing, and he wants to rezone the front section as B1 for businesses, and the back sections that actually do adjoin Springs Crossing R3 for residential. We approved those applications, so there'll be a public hearing at our November Planning Commission meeting. If it's approved, then it'll come to council in December to rezone those, that parcel.
There's a hearing for that as well.
There's a hearing for that. So there's a hearing at Planning and Zoning, and if it's approved, then there's a hearing at council also.
When's the plan zoning hearing?
It's supposed to be November 11th, but that is Veterans Day and it's a holiday, so I've already emailed everybody with Planning and Zoning. We'll do it November the 18th.
Any questions for or comments on
How many homes do they want to put there?
On that section, it was like a little over 100.
Right at 100 on that
Yeah,
first section.
on that section, and that's just what is in city limits. There's more property that's not in city limits that we haven't talked about yet, because if he does that, then he would have to annex that in before it comes to planning and zoning.
So, I think we need to kind of open that can of worms, if you will. So the plan for Randy Goggins is an additional 376 homes. He's currently completing the last 40 or so of Springs Crossings. And so you're looking at, over on that side of Highway 70, you're looking at about 400 new homes. The Saddlewood Trails development on the other side of Highway 70 is between 210 and 220. It could change. And he is potentially looking at some expansion back there as well. So I encourage our residents and anybody else who's interested to come to these public hearings for the rezoning, because there's going to be a lot of density in those particular areas that we need to make sure that, you know, we're considering everything. And right now, I think we are, but still, people need to, I don't want people to be surprised by it. Those will be, you know, publicly announced, but if you're like me, half the time you don't see that stuff. Even though you put a legal announcement out in writing, a lot of people don't see it, so we'll get the word out. Any other questions or comments about that? Now, I believe you had a recreation board meeting. It was planned. Did you have it?
We didn't. It was on a holiday, but we're gonna meet the first Monday of November. And then I need to get with you, update the cadence on that, because starting in 2022, we're gonna go to that cadence we talked about, every even month. Not every month, but every other month, so it'd be the even months of that. So, but I will update the group that we are for go ahead on the budget items we talked about, the big ticket item is the fencing at Bolton and Lewis. So we've already talked to the fencing people there, sort of getting in their queue. Last thing we heard is they're going to order supplies with there for that project. And then all the other things are pretty much the things that we can just do one-off. So roughly in the budget was about $85,000 that were put for upgrades, mostly at Bolton and Lewis. And there's a couple other projects going on too. So it'll be a busy year for facade updates, especially around those two parts, and then for the years going forward. So yeah, we'll meet next month, and then we'll meet the following February of 2022.
Any other questions for the rec board? Okay, water board, can you enlighten us, Alan?
We approved the bid for the radio read meters and stuff, and their plans are that they probably gonna be February before we get them. And they'll start, I think they're planning on starting here in town and getting these put out to start with and everything.
Is the plan to convert all the residential customers to the RFD meters?
Them, the industrial, everything will be radio read.
Will they have to dig into the yard, or is it just a plug and play?
Have the meter box to put the new meter in and stuff.
Okay.
Is that an expense that the resident absorbs?
Well, you pay for it through your water bill. Now, a lot of folks don't realize the water board is a separate entity from the city of Columbiana. It's not managed or controlled in any way by the city, other than I get to appoint the board members, and that's the extent of the control that we have over everything. But they basically are self-sustaining. There's no, it's paid for with your the fees that you pay for your water, and then they use that for maintenance and upgraded equipment and et cetera, et cetera. So. Okay. No other questions on that? Okay, so we got a few resolutions on the agenda. The first one is a resolution authorizing me to sign a contract to purchase property for a new public works facility. I went back and did a little, we've been talking about this thing forever, it seems like, at least in this administration. And the first presentation that I could see to the city council was in December of last year. And through that time, there's been, things changed, different alternatives were considered, and blah, blah, blah. After a lot of cussing and discussing and analyzing and cogitating, we finally decided that this piece of property that adjoins the sports complex on McDowell Road was the right one. And that property currently belongs to Greedy. I'm going to give you a little bit of, so this is the satellite view, and this is the I don't know what you call this, the map, if you will. This is the sports complex, and this is McDowell Road. It's unclear as to whether or not this building will be retained or whether or not it will be taken down and we'll just start from scratch. But this is about 2.5 acres. It adjoins another 2.5 acres, this right here, that the city owns, and then that adjoins, obviously, the city-owned sports complex. The city value, and this was obtained by looking at various tax records and whatnot, is about, the property value, market value is about $280,000. This is what we would have to do if we were going to try to retain the building that is there. We have an engineering study being done and that helped us to analyze sites for the public works facility, as well as a potential new fire station. And in addition to that, they are providing us with a layout, an artist's rendering of a facade on the site, and a rough order of magnitude estimate of the cost to have it bid, to help us for when we go out to put this out for bid. So that study is in its final stages and should be wrapping up pretty soon, and we're looking forward to getting the deliverables there. But the bottom line is here is Greedy has agreed to sell us that property for $100,000. So, is there any further discussion, questions about the
Yeah, I got
proposed
something.
resolution? Yeah.
If we're able to keep the bones of this building,
Mhm.
I think it's a home run hit. But if we have to start all over,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the best spot for us. I don't know. And
Well-
I want them to have a building.
And then what we don't have an understanding of is that's a warehouse. And he's gonna be using it as both a warehouse and a portion of it is a maintenance garage. And the garbage trucks are gonna go in there and they're very heavy and we need to make sure that that slab is adequately stressed to deal with that. And I think that can be done too, without having to tear out the whole slab. You can just tear out the tracks in there.
So the study will tell us that.
No, not on this. The study is only evaluating, their analysis was that we would be better off to tear that building down. That was their preliminary analysis. So their solution is gonna say, here's the layout of the building. That building is 31,000 square feet. We're looking at one that is 16,000 square feet.
16.5, something.
Yeah, and, which is adequate. I mean, that was way bigger than what we needed. And we were, as you recall, we're looking at that for potentially combining the fire station and the public works in the same building. So over 16,000 square feet and, anyway, so they provided us a preliminary layout and they'll come back to us with the artist rendering and the ROM cost. It also includes the site layout as far as paving, et cetera, so.
Well, we won't know how much we have to repair the concrete. Correct?
Well, you can do some bores on the concrete, get those tests done pretty soon. There's one area that we know where there's some settling. One section that could possibly be cut out. Again, it's just like these streets we were talking about. I don't know what's underneath that concrete, and I don't really know how thick it is, but we can bore it, we can figure that out. And that's not a very expensive thing to do.
I think that this is just me and my non-engineering mind talking, but I think the shell of that building, to tear down the shell with all that steel and that structure will be a hard sell to tear it down. Because there's a lot of steel there that's probably good quality steel. So I mean, if the concrete's the issue, hopefully we can work around, leave the shell, the skeleton of it, you know. And I don't even know if we need. I'm sitting there thinking out loud. I don't even know if the whole thing really needs to be enclosed. I mean, if it's a canopy versus half of it enclosed or whatever, I don't know. But in my mind, that's a pretty shell framework of what's existing today. Hopefully, we'll be able to.
Could we get that done?
What?
Like, boil the concrete?
Absolutely.
I mean, I
But
think we
the point
need-
is right now is, that's the site. So the question is, do we tear it down and we build new, or do we modify what's there? And I honestly believe that the analysis that they're gonna give us on, the preliminary design and the layout of the building, et cetera, and the rough order of magnitude cost will still be of value to us. Because, again, maybe we take it, they're proposing 16,500 square foot building, and we take that other 14,000 square feet over there, and we can just maybe take that steel down, or maybe we leave it and it's like an outdoor storage shed like what we have back here. There's all kinds of options that I think, right now, we need to get that piece of property before it goes away from us, because we've been dawdling for years. So, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I make a recommendation. We accept resolution 102102. It's authorizing the mayor to sign a contract to purchase the facility for the City of Columbiana Public Works facility located at 301 McDowell Road.
Second.
Okay, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Mizell?
Yes.
Rustin?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Phillips?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. And the resolution is passed.
I guess that, when do we, is there any conversation about when that we suspect that may close? We talking a month, 2 months? Do you know yet? Preliminary?
I asked him, when he emailed the thing, he said as soon as we,
Good deal.
so we'll sign the contract and send it back tomorrow.
There you go. Now I got your site.
Okay, we talked about this and this first came up, I think, through Councilman Rustin when he was contacted about doing some maintenance on the cross-country trail behind Elvin Hill. That's in addition to being a cross-country trail for the schools, it is considered a community trail for those of us who want to hike, run, or what have you back there. And so the purpose of this resolution is twofold. There was, number one, when this issue first came up, myself, we didn't have a record of it in the clerk's office, and apparently the city council was not aware that a memorandum of agreement had been entered into between the city, the county, and the Board of Education. And that's fine, except that memorandum of agreement is in essence a contract. And in order for that contract to be binding, we have to have the approval of the city council for the mayor to be able to execute that. So the purpose of this resolution is that I spoke to the city attorney, and we can satisfy two objectives that we have here. The first one is to basically legitimize the memorandum of agreement that's already in place. We're not trying to back out of that or anything by passing this resolution and which says we're gonna adopt this amendment to the existing MOA. And then the other concern that was raised was that the MOA just simply said that it was the city's responsibility to maintain the trail. And that's all well and good, but what does that mean? Is it gotta be 10 feet wide, 4 feet wide? What kind of grade do we need to have on it? A whole host of things. And so we did get that information about what the maintenance requirements would be. And then there was another concern. Because of the storms that we've had lately, there were a lot of trees that were blown down across the cross-country trail. And the city didn't have the equipment or the capability to remove stuff like that. Now, to their to their good, and can't think of the word that I'm looking for, to their credit, the county actually went out there and cleared those trees. And that was not part of their responsibility under this agreement. But so going forward, so that there wouldn't be any dispute over that, we said if there is, in this amendment, if there is some sort of natural disaster or severe weather or some other type of force majeure, that the parties to the MOA would basically work together to address those types of issues. So the purpose of this resolution is authorizing me to sign that amendment, which is essentially makes this a legitimate contract between the city, the county, and the Board of Education. Any question or discussion over that?
So this would be a quarterly process, right? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, it is, and once again, so this was you can't read that, the existing MOA, and this is what the requirements are as far as maintenance are concerned. And then we just put in there that when you say a quarterly requirement, I put in the MOA that the Board of Education, the school's designated representative would meet with the city's designated representative, most likely Alan, and go out and inspect the cross-country trail on a quarterly basis. But I also put a provision in there, maybe they're having some sort of cross-country meet or something like that, or maybe a member of the community is out there on the trail and they see something wrong, then that they can bring that attention that up to our attention, and we can go out there and address the issue if we need to, so.
It washes out a lot up there, where the gate is.
It does, and in fact, you know, there's a lot of little culverts that's been put in back there, and
Man, I see it where the gravel runs on the track when we have PE and stuff.
right. So, you know, this thing, I think this MOA was executed in like 19 or 18, I can't remember.
Probably around
Well,
18.
where's the date on there?
August 14th.
19, 2019. And so obviously because you guys didn't know about it, we weren't doing any maintenance out there, so.
Well, let's
now
hope we
we
don't
do.
have 2 hurricanes and another tornado that tears
Yeah.
it up too, so.
Yeah. So,
Mr.
we
Ma-
we had our share this year.
I'd like to introduce Resolution 1021. It's authorizing the mayor to sign an amendment for MOA agreement for the Shelby County High School cross-country course, site improvements, and a community trail.
I'll second.
And because there's a commitment of resources from the city on this one, I'd ask for a roll call.
Councilmember Mizell?
Yes.
Rustin?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Phillips?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes.
I just hope we don't run out of resources with the city workers.
Well, you know, Alan brought that up in his discussion, and I'm not saying this to be critical of Alan. I'm getting tired of hearing about shortage of people, so I'm gonna get directly involved in getting these people, and this is not an impossible thing to do. I know it's difficult right now, so we've been talking about it for a long time, so we're gonna get the people that we need to do the jobs that we're supposed to be doing in the city, so. Okay, so the next resolution is authorizing me to sign a contract with CDG Engineering for engineering drainage services. And so, before we get into discussion, and I know you can't read any of this either because it's too small, but basically this study, it will involve 3 things, if you will. Preliminary drainage study, and it's these 9 things, and I'm gonna let the engineers, probably Lance, talk about it. And then GIS mapping, so that we know where all the drainage flows and stormwater drainage pipes and things like that are in the system. And then we need to look at city ordinances. We do not have any planning or other city ordinances that regulate things like drain pipes under driveways when people build a driveway to connect to a public road. So we've got to be able to do that so that we don't create additional problems for ourselves going forward. So Lance Armbruster and Logan Echave are here from CDG. I'm going to turn it over to you guys if you want to just kind of give us a quick overview of what you guys are planning to do.
Sure. Well, first of all, just
By the way, this is, before you get into that, this is the maps of the areas, 2 basins where they'll be doing their study, and this is the cost that's in their proposal. I'm gonna go back to the other chart if you would. Not where we want to go. Okay, well, sorry.
So I'm Logan Chavez, this lamp armrester. First of all, just want to thank you guys for inviting us to be here today, the mayor and the city council, and obviously everyone who lives here. And I appreciate what Cindy Harmon had to say. You know, through our discussions, you know, we understand how real these problems are and how they affect people's lives. And it was touching here that, you know, you're from here and that you plan on staying here. So the conversations we've had with the mayor have been, you know, how do you want to approach this? Do you want us to come in here and say, hey, for the next couple of years, here's what you can do? Or do you want to say, hey, here's what you can do for the next 50 years? And part of what we need to do is we need to conduct a study, and that'll help us understand the infrastructure. So I'd like Lance to,
Sure.
you can speak to that a little bit better.
Yeah. So, thanks, council, thanks, mayor, for the opportunity to be here, as Logan mentioned. But, you know, we take a system such as yours, and you alluded to it earlier, Mayor, that you have a fragmented network. You know, a storm pipe may be installed over here when it's needed, and the next one when it's needed, and then one in between might be replaced. And what you end up with is a network that was not well thought out,
It was just happenstance, so to speak. And sometimes you're even missing ditches where there should be ditches. So, you know, before we jump in, you know, it would be easy to jump in and say, well, let's just, you know, start digging today. But where do we dig? Where do we design? You know, and that's the purpose of the study. The study is an opportunity to say, okay, well, here's the core of the city, as shown in the map just a second ago.
If you need me to refer to that, or if you need.
If you want to, that'd be good to put that back up, actually. You know, so here's what we've called the core of the city. You know, it's not every square foot of city limits, but it's kind of a central urbanized area for the most part. So within this area, the older part of town, you know, particularly the blue lines, which represent the major drainage ways. You know, we want to take a look at those and define of those which are the critical ones, which are the ones where we have major crossings. Some of those we've already had the opportunity to visit. Some of these are very obvious. Some of them aren't obvious. But a study would take, it would involve a lot of boots on the ground. And so we would have a pretty significant effort here doing data collection. And so part of that data collection would be able to provide a nice map that would be useful for Public Works, mayor, whoever else they authorized. But it's a opportunity to see the features, see the assets that you have in your major drainage network. But we would take that information from that mapping and build our drainage models. And so we would look at how it's operating today. That would obviously identify some things that you are aware of, but some of these things aren't as obvious. But we would also provide, you know, proposed conditions. You know, what are the improvements that are needed? You know, but the goal would be to reduce the flooding occurrence in the critical areas. Now, this is not every driveway pipe. This is not every single swell in the city, because at a certain point you got to define what is your core. You know, what is your major drainage way? And so that would be the focus of the study. You know, so that we would want to come to you with a series of recommendations, and from that it would really begin kind of a dialogue of, okay, well, what are your goals? What are your immediate goals? You know, as far as short-term, long-term, you know, we talking one or multiple construction projects. We want to know how you would want to kind of divide this up. And from there, you know, design phase would commence after this project. So that in a nutshell is our approach for this study, so that we would know exactly where future construction projects would need to occur.
Let me go back to this, if you don't mind, Lance, and what I'd like for you to do, I'm gonna blow these bullets up, or try to anyway, so that, and we'll take them a few at a time. It doesn't like it when I blow it up, it shifts everything to the center. All right, so can you just briefly talk about each of these bullets so that people get an idea, and the council especially?
Absolutely.
All right, so this is the preliminary drainage study. So if you can talk about what's going to be included in that study, what are we paying for? If you can talk about those things.
Sure. So obviously, to know where the stormwater is going and how it flows, we gotta know the contour, the lay of the land. So we will take, you know, available information, publicly available contours, and develop those maps. Basically, some of those are a lot more detailed than the version of the map that you saw earlier. But after that, we will come, and myself and some other engineers we want to get, you know, we already spent some time with Public Works, but we want to spend additional time, you know, to really kind of carve out, you know, the problematic areas, the areas that we need to emphasize in our study. And so that would be what we would be doing in item 2. So that's really critical. That's laying the groundwork of everything to come. Then we have,
the field survey, and some of that is very detailed surveying that is very elevation specific at critical areas. Some of that is more of, okay, well, we have an inlet here, and a 36-inch pipe connecting the two. And so, but that's part of the mapping. We would be performing that at that time too. Again, another key component as I've visited and looked at some of the issues, particularly around College Street and so forth, I see a need to do a detailed analysis, a survey of the major creek there. I think that is having an impact on what we're seeing right there in the parking lot of Piggly Wiggly and so forth.
And we talked about that, I think, at some of our preliminary meetings in a great deal of detail, because a lot of water goes into that creek. And there are some things that are impacting the flow of the water in that creek, and our ability to deal with that is to a certain degree may be limited by environmental regulations in the state. So all that's got to be sorted out is what we can do to be able to make that creek be able to carry the water like it should in an environmentally compliant manner.
Sure, absolutely. Then we begin our drainage modeling and so forth. So this is where we apply certain rain events to your topography, taking into consideration the soils and ground cover and so forth. And that's what really gives us our flows. And so those flows, got distracted, sorry. Squirrel.
Dale wanted us to fix something.
But, we take those flows, I'll move into point number 6, so now we've got the water that's coming off the land. Well, now we've got to route it. We've got to route it through your ditches, through your culverts and so forth. And that's really where we're going to start to see, approve what is undersized. We've got certain standards that we'll try to hit as far as, what is considered an acceptable rain event. And we can discuss those further in detail as we get into the study. But that's what we're really looking at, because we have rain events. I know everybody has heard of a 100-year rain event, and I've heard several times, we've had 300-year rain events this year. Well, in engineering lingo, that's a 1% chance every single year. So there are statistical rain events that we look at and we apply to your city and your network as we evaluate it. Kind of moving on, I kind of already hit point number 7. As far as, we got a model of what we're doing or what is existing, but we want a model of the proposed conditions. And the results of those proposed conditions, whether it's taking, a certain culvert, upgrading, replacing it, or widening a certain ditch. Those are just some examples of the types of improvements that we would anticipate. But we want to provide that to you. We would meet with you guys beforehand before we really finalize our report. So the intent is to give you the information to say, okay, well, yeah, our problems are big and they're wide, but maybe we can prioritize them, based on certain criteria, or lump a certain sector of town into one particular neighborhood. And from that, we would try to give you some kind of rough magnitude cost associated with that to help you in that decision process.
Okay, so I'm going to move over here to items 2 and 3. Hopefully can whip through those pretty quick if I can get that thing to move. Okay, so the GIS mapping, probably don't need to go through every bullet here, but if you could just explain, what that's going to involve.
Sure. sure a lot of people are familiar with GIS in the form of tax parcels, being able to look up information about, you know, where your home is, as far as rough property lines. But when we mention GIS in this context, what we're talking about is, think about surveying GPS-based, but the ability to provide that on a very nice, easy-to-use map. I believe, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's already some of this with the sewer infrastructure here, the sanitary sewer. So we talked a little bit about that, but it would, along these major drainage ways, identify the infrastructure, and basically provide that in a very nice, easy-to-use map. And so this map is useful for, certainly for maintenance, to get a good broad look at your entire system in one fell swoop. So it's very good that. It's also helpful for planning, and it is something that, you know, we will give the data to the city and can discuss how that data can be updated. But really, this map is a snapshot in time of what the drainage system would entail.
Okay, and just real quick, maybe you can be more eloquent about what we're looking for as far as ordinances. By the way, we talked about driveway ordinances at the planning commission meeting last week, but not necessarily as it relates to stormwater drainage or culverts.
Sure. So without consistent or very defined regulations as it relates to stormwater, you're essentially allowing each developer, each contractor, each engineer really to come in and oftentimes to make their own judgment call about what is appropriate, you know, what kind of standards, what certain rainfall event, you know, should this be designed for. You know, most of the cities that we work in have detailed ordinances, you know, that really help define that, so that there's not a lot of guesswork. You know, even as a consultant, consultants kind of just want to know what your standards are, oftentimes. So this is an opportunity to come in and evaluate those standards, and oftentimes the lack thereof, and provide you with some recommendations on your new subdivisions. You know, what kind of standards do you want implemented? This deals with detention ponds and things of that nature. But also at that time, you know, the mayor's mentioned concerns about driveway inconsistencies and even the construction methods of certain driveways. So we want to provide as good a general recommendation as we can. So.
Okay. Any questions from the council?
Yeah, I've got a couple, Lance. When we talk about, what you're presenting on is really just a study phase, right? And then obviously then at that point you would have a design phase and then an implementation phase. So it's really just a three-step process, right? So
yes.
Once you do the study phase, you guys will come back and say, here's the designs that we recommend, right?
It would be the improvements.
Right.
And it'd be kind of up to the city to say, okay, we want to tackle
Yeah,
these.
we would
Right.
prioritize them and probably contract them incrementally.
Right. So in that design phase or the implementation phase, regardless of where that goes, so say for instance, and I'm just asking this question because I don't know. We talked about the Piggly Wiggly. I'm thinking in my mind every time it rains heavily that the elementary school floods and it runs over to the city park and there's a creek down there. So in those situations when those arise, so say for instance those are two hotbeds, all right, so behind Jack's and then over by the city park. Are we, and those homeowners or those business owners, they're not willing to accept that cost because obviously they're gonna have some costs in that too. If the issue relies on their side, how does that work?
Typically at this level, the mayor is smiling at me, but typically at this level, I would consider what we're tackling on the level of public improvements. And we can certainly have that discussion. But oftentimes what I've seen, when it gets to the point where the city is authorizing a major construction, project. It's for the benefit of multiple, you know, homeowners, residents, so forth. So at that point, it's a city cost generally.
Even though it involves a potentially private business or private residence.
It's murky. So the city would potentially have to obtain easements from the private property owners. But for example, if we were gonna put a drainage ditch and it was gonna run through several pieces of private property because there is a larger area that is routinely flooding and we need to be able to control the stormwater, then this council would have to determine whether or not that meets the requirements of the public purpose doctrine. And intuitively, I would think it possibly would if it provides a general enough benefit to a large enough number of people. And then the city could go on that private property and dig those ditches or install those pipes or do whatever it is. And would most likely have to obtain utility easements from the property owners. So it's not a simple yes/no answer. You could have some property owners who don't want you to do it, and that can be problematic. And then you could still potentially do it by exercising eminent domain, and that's another can of worms that probably we'd never want to get into. But the point is you know, hopefully we would be able to solve these issues by dealing with problems that are already in existing public rights of way.
Two more. On the GIS mapping, how would that look? Would it be effective flow accuracy and ineffective? How does that work?
Now, at that point, it's essentially identifying the infrastructure itself. The report is the place to kind of present flow information of that nature. GIS is going to say, okay, there's a 18-inch concrete pipe, you know, at this street crossing, you know, with 2 inlets on either side, connected to the next street with, you know, certain size ditch. That's the scale of those maps.
Okay. And one other question. You mentioned reduce stormwater flooding or whatever. And I mean, I think this year has been unprecedented, but I think a lot of people think of the project like this, it's going to eliminate flood issues, and that's not the case. So in your mind, I don't know. I mean, you look at these other cities, and I think these other cities are a lot farther along than what Columbiana is. Even if they're newer, they got better infrastructure, but every time it rains, it floods, and there's nothing they can do about it. So do you think it will be accurate to say significantly that the floods that we're having are not 100-year floods, meaning if we dramatically include our infrastructure, obviously it's going to reduce flooding, we hope, but will it reduce it enough to where it makes enough an impact to where we're not having this discussion going forward?
Very good question. And you can think of the recent floods that occurred not too far from here.
And I say that because, I mean, like, take for instance, City of Pelham, they got 12 inches in a few hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that there's a reservoir that can take that much rain in a lot of places. Maybe I'm inaccurate there, but
there's certainly, I mean, there's a point of diminishing return, you know, and so, you know, do we want to have a system that is designed to have a 96% chance annually of not being overwhelmed? You know, that's kind of one of the factors that we could look at. So every single year there would be a 4% chance.
That's right.
That's one example. We could get into specifics, but there are some acceptable standards that we go, because you don't want to be paying double the price, per se, to cover that last 4%.
So is there a standard, I guess in my world, some metric or KRI, something like that, to where you want to get in that threshold where it's taking that 96%, on a routine basis?
Sure, you know, we call that, you know, we talked about a 100-year event, and that's commonly referred to in floodplains, flooding through FEMA. But commonly, we will use a 25-year storm. We've yet to kind of discuss it and settle in on which threshold, but that's a very common, and so that's where that 96% annually would come from.
Yeah, I just think a lot of times the misconception is when we have these conversations, people think we're going to eliminate flooding altogether, and that's not the case.
Yeah, you won't find the word eliminate in our
No,
proposal.
yeah, I agree. I understand that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Lance or Logan?
I have a question for Charlene, I think, no. What is on the cost of this, the actual money the city is getting? Are we getting money for?
This is being paid for out of the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan.
Okay.
And we've already received our half for 2021, and it was a little over 540,000. We'll receive that same amount next year. And this, we did budget to spend the money this year and next year, and this is one of the eligible expenses that can be used.
That's what I was thinking.
So those funds, those ARPA funds are restricted on somewhat limited basis.
Yes.
Okay.
But stormwater was one of the specific areas that it could be used for, and
That's
so
what I was thinking.
we could probably, based on what we saw this year, use every penny of it on stormwater. So. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question. With the city putting forth this effort to do what they can in order to help resolve the drainage issue, is there currently an ordinance or some sort of regulation in place because I know that residents will, when they clear brush, they will stack that in the gutters, right, for street pickup. And then that creates an issue. So is there anything in place that helps the citizens do their part to not exacerbate the situation, but to help keep the flow open?
No, in fact, even some of our, for example, the state of Alabama, they cleaned out a ditch over in front of the industrial park and just cut all the trees down in the trash and left it in the ditch. So it's not just citizens who do it, but we don't have that ordinance, which doesn't mean that we can't have that ordinance. So I think there's lots of things that we can do to improve that. Okay.
One more question. How long does it take for a study like this to come back?
So we presented a schedule, and we would, it depends on when we're authorized, of course, but assuming November 1 authorization, we would look at having things wrapped up by the 1st of May.
So I think your proposal was starting on December the 1st and finishing
Sorry,
on the
yes,
1st
yes.
of May. It was a 5-month span. But if you start in November, that's fine. We'd love to get it done sooner, so. Any other questions for Lance or Logan? Any other discussion? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 102104, authorizing the mayor to sign a contract with CDG for engineering drainage services.
A second.
Okay, and again, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Mizell?
Yes.
Rushton?
Yeah.
King?
Yes.
Phillips?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Okay, so the resolution is adopted. All right, last resolution, azimuth grants. I'm gonna go again to a little background information on these guys. Recently, a representative from Senator Tuberville's office, who's responsible for grants, Director of Grants and Projects, I think is what her title was. But anyway, she made a presentation here at the Old Mill Square to representatives across Shelby County about all the federal grants that are available to us. And like is the case in so many areas, there are literally hundreds of billions of dollars of federal grant money available, and the state of Alabama is near the bottom, like second to last, I can't remember which set, of all the states who get them. And that get, as far as money that we get, that includes states that have, are smaller in geographical size and smaller in population. They're getting more money than we are. So the money is there, and the purpose of her being there was to encourage the municipalities to seek these grants. And her office, who is part of Senator Tuberville's staff, could assist us in locating those grants. During that meeting, there was a discussion that you know, a lot of cities, particularly smaller municipalities like Columbiana, do not have grant writers. So oftentimes they need to contract for grants. Now, we have applied for some grants and used grant writers that don't charge a fee. And for example, for street paving and stuff like that, we've been, as far as I know, pretty much completely unsuccessful with that. We've been successful at some other CDBG grants, like there's a sanitary sewer project that we're trying to get resolved that is being hung up by an easement, as we were talking about on the wastewater. But anyway, the message is that these grant writers, if you get one grant, most likely pay for themselves. And this is a company that was recommended to us called Azimuth Grants. And what I would like to enter into an agreement with, and what they do here is, you can see they do grant research, they actually write the grant, and then they do grant management after the grant is awarded. What I want to do initially here is contract with them to do some grant research, where they will basically look at what types of grant opportunities are available to us and make recommendations, like a 2-year plan or something like that. But you know, they've been in business maybe about 10 or 11 years. They've during that period of time, and they're a locally owned, women-owned small business, headquartered in Birmingham. But they've gotten more than $100 million in grants for their clients. Now, they show that they have about 500 clients, so if I'm not doing my math right, what is that, about $2 million a client? Anyway, and this is too small to read, but education's got the Alabama Board of Education Technical College System, the state of Georgia, Oglethorpe University. This is a County Board of Education in Georgia, and this is Birmingham Southern College. They've done grant writing for the city of Birmingham, Montgomery. I can't remember one of these other ones. I found this odd, or interesting, or coincidence, whatever. This little town right here is Bernie, Texas, and Kathy and I used to live in Bernie, Texas, so I thought that was kind of interesting that they had done stuff there. A nonprofit, and they do businesses. This is basically their fees. There is what we're looking at initially is to contract them to do this grant research and help us develop a plan for 2-year plan for grants, and that is $8,500. Going forward, if we ask them to help us write grants, this is their fee structure right here. So the purpose of this resolution is to authorize me to contract with these guys for this $85. We went ahead and put this fee consulting rate in here, but my initial plan is just to focus on the grant study or grant analysis. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, look at the term. Should the term be starts August 30th, 2021 to December 31st, 2022? I was looking at the contract, not necessarily the resolution.
Oh, I don't have that on the chart. So it's on the contract? Well, we can certainly fix that. Okay. So that's not an issue.
Do we know an average, have they told us what an average, grant takes on an hourly basis? Did they mention that maybe?
What it takes.
Yeah, like an average grant to write
How long?
3 hours.
Oh, how many
2
hours? How many hours? It depends upon the scope of the grant
Sure.
and the specific grant. And so what they typically do, as it was presented to me in my discussions with them, is they will sell us a block of hours. Now, what I would do, once we got this study, I'd start picking their brains as far as, well, how many hours is it gonna take you to do a proposal, write a proposal for this grant or that grant or whatnot? And then we could decide, you know, if we wanted to purchase a block of hours, the more hours we agree to, the cheaper the hourly rate. I think the rate goes down to like $145 an hour was their lowest rate. This was like the middle of the road, wasn't it, Shirley?
Yes.
155.
Mhm.
So it just depends upon how many hours we agree to buy, or if we're gonna do it, sort of a pay by the drink type thing, and just let them bill us for ever how many hours that they incur, we'll end up paying the higher rate.
I do think it's important if you know, because I had no issues with the other grant writer. Obviously, I don't know the deal with that, but if we're going to pay for the study, I would encourage everybody has the opportunity to get grants out there to flood them with grant opportunities. That way, if we can get one grant, it's going to pay for it. But if we've got that resource, I think it's important to.
And my approach would try to be is, we'll pick a grant, and when you look at the grant, it tells you what are the requirements, what are the things that you have to put in your proposal. It talks about what their evaluation criteria is in order for you to award that grant, what criteria you as a community have to meet to be able to be eligible for all that sort of stuff. And when you look at that, and I would have sort of in my head, and we would talk with the grant writers, and what they do is if you looked at the package that I sent out, they've got this list of subject matter experts pretty much all over the country, depending upon what kind of grant that it is you're trying to pursue. But they need to know your community, obviously. What I liked about Azimuth is they are a locally owned, relatively, company, and so they generally know Alabama, if you will. And if you look at their clients up there, it was mostly Alabama and Georgia, even though we had the outlier there in Texas. But so my point is I would then think we would be able to come up with a not to exceed number of hours and get them to commit to that, to do the grant for us. And we can pick, one and wait, see what happens, or we can have them do 2 or 3 or what have you. But I agree with you, Ricky. I think one of these, if their average grant that they're getting is $2 million, one of these is gonna pay for them probably pretty quick. Any other questions?
Is this something that's already in the budget to do?
That's a good question, Vicki. I don't know if this is specifically in the budget, but I believe we do have some wiggle room and some line items where we could fit that $8,500 in. Charlene, do you know, it's not specifically in the budget, is it?
It's not.
Would this be considered professional services?
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, it's our consultant.
Mr. Mayor, I make a recommendation with set resolution 102105, is authorizing the mayor to sign a contract with Azimuth, am I saying that right? Azimuth Grants for grant consulting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll do another roll call since it involves spending some money.
Councilmember Mizell,
No.
Councilmember Rustin.
Yes.
King,
No.
Phillips,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. So I believe the motion carried 3-2? All right. Is there any other business that we need to, that anybody wants to bring up, discuss? All right, mayor's report, not much on here. We agreed to participate in the Economic Development Academy, and that orientation is in Montgomery the 1st of November. Kind of in conjunction with that, November 1 through 3, the League of Municipalities is having their Municipal Leadership Institute and their Certified Municipal Official graduation. One of the things, I probably should have put this up there, the legislative reception up there first. There is a special session of the state legislature in session right now, and they have planned on the evening of November the 1st a legislative reception, but you have to be registered for the Municipal Leadership Institute. So if any of our council members are interested in participating in that legislative reception of the Municipal Leadership Institute, the last day to register for that is October 20th. I think it's a good opportunity to meet with the state legislators and find out about what's on the agenda, and then for us to basically relate to them what we believe is important from the perspective of our constituents is concerned. So that's about all on that. So announcements.
All right, I'm just gonna go through this week and next week since they're so easy. So this week is the Shelby County Fair. It started tonight, it will run through Saturday. On Friday, it's also homecoming week for Shelby County High School. Friday at 1:45 is the homecoming parade. And then Friday night will be the homecoming game. Next weekend is Halloween. We have the Monster Walk on the 29th, on Friday the 29th from 4 to 5:30. On Saturday morning the 30th is the Witches Ride at 10 o'clock. And then Saturday night is the Great Neighborhood Trick or Treat. And Saturday afternoon will be the police department's trick or treat with a police officer on Mildred Street. So they'll do that between 3 and 5 on Saturday the 30th. So a lot of stuff going on.
Is there a time that the Great Neighborhood Trick or Treat is gonna, I mean, like, is there?
We said 5
Okay.
till 8, till 9.
It's
Eight,
5
yeah.
Did you say just on Mildred Street?
The police department will trick or treat with kids just on Mildred Street. So that's their plan from 3 to 5. They're gonna, I think they've given some flyers out at the school, and parents can sign a permission slip and bring their kids to trick or treat with the policeman.
Okay.
So, busy day.
Any other questions or comments for Alan? Okay, this is where we open it up for public comments. So anybody have any questions or comments about any issues they'd like to raise?
I would say as someone that has worked with nonprofits before and understand like the value that a good grant writer like brings to the table, it makes all the difference. Just wanting to go in with a willingness and give it a try, like, doesn't get you grants. So like, I really appreciate y'all bringing that to the table and passing it, because I know that it makes a difference.
Will y'all keep us abreast of the study for the flooding?
Yeah, now, I don't know that there's, we came up with a milestone schedule, but I don't know that there'll necessarily be a report out. But what we can do is we can probably set up some, like each one of those milestones is met on the schedule, we can have a little brief meeting and we can talk about it so we can figure out where we are. Does that sound reasonable?
And the reason I say that is because we're like Cindy. 5 years ago, it was way before you came, we had a flood happen in Columbiana, and we got up Christmas morning and had ankle-deep water in our house. Come to find out, when they did the road camera down, half of that sewage or the drainage ditch that goes down the middle of we're the last one on the hill. Everything runs down to us too. But the pipe that goes through the street is collapsed and it's still never been fixed. Now, Big Al came and they put in a side drainage in between our house and the house next door, which has helped. Of course, I know it's not gonna resolve anything with the floods like we had this past week. But if that drainage ditch that's down the middle of the road wasn't collapsed, our road would be so much better because it floods, even simple rain, nothing like what we had a couple of weeks ago. It still floods through there and you're holding your breath that you're not gonna get another flood in the house like we had that time.
Yeah. That's why we're doing this, Susan. It's because.
I mean, it's really bad on
We have
that street.
some aging in some cases, inadequate in other cases, infrastructure, and it's like Lance said, over the years, as this town, this city has evolved, we just kind of did things in pieces, and so nothing's really integrated, and it's not always necessarily thought out from.
I know, and they were gonna fix the drainage pipe that's underneath the road, but it never got done either. You know, it's just totally collapsed underneath the road. So, water can't go anyplace but, you know, in the ditch across, and we're the ones that live on Collins Street, that's right there by Shelby Woods. So, everything goes that way.
And that's another thing, a lot of times when there's an issue like that, as you suggested, we'll go out and we'll do some sort of temporary Band-Aid fix. It doesn't always solve the
Well,
problem.
that's kind of what they did, they
Yeah,
put in a
in
little
some
drain
cases,
for it.
It might even exacerbate the problem, because at the end of the day, the water has to go someplace.
That's correct.
And we have to figure out where it's gonna go without it becoming a problem for someone else. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, go ahead.